Alright, time for the second video today. So let's talk about why an old guard is needed. Now, when I say this, what I'm referring to is my specific idea of an old guard. It's been addressed in an old video, but naturally I doubt many people have seen it, so I'll just rehash it now. When it comes to establishing systems, a foothold needs to be put into place. You need to have, a ruling party of some sort or some area that you control that is, run by your own belief system. And so, for securing a foothold, it will often require the engaging of necessary, if hypocritical, tasks. For example, you may not like taxation, but if your goal is to fund a state to protect people's rights. Now, the anarchists don't really have as much of a problem with this because, well, they're anarchists. They don't believe in a state, but for everyone else, they do. And so, you're going to need to collect taxation. Even if you believe taxation is morally wrong, you won't necessarily have to if you want a state to be maintained, unless you have some replacement. I've drawn up a replacement, but not everyone has. Not everyone has the plans for as such things, and thus you will naturally still have the issue. Not to mention, even with my planning, taxes are still required for the interim period as the transition occurs, which is the point. Another thing to note, and why we'll continue this, is that the old guard, as I'm addressing, serves to secure said foothold, similar to what you would call a vanguard. Now, the vanguardist belief was in Russia, for example with Lenin, that a certain amount of intellectuals, people who believe in communism and the socialist cause that Marx championed, will necessarily have to gather around a few elites who are intellectually capable and understanding, who will push forward the party and establish first a socialist state and then allow for communism to take root from there. The vanguard is essentially an elite that takes control so that communism can form. Similar is believed by a lot of people. In truth, it's a very elitist position, but it is simply a truth. It's just how things work. You need a group of people to first take control before actually establishing the proper moral safeguards that your belief system requires and the moral stances that people will hold. You cannot just rush into your position without causing a lot of chaos, especially because there are a lot of kinks that need to be worked out. For example, let's say you want to abolish certain programs, but you still have private means that you wish to do it. Okay, great. You want to abolish programs A, B, and C, right? What happens when you just abolish them outright and the systems haven't been set up yet for you to, have that taken care of by someone else? Because, let's face it, if there's a system in place for something, it's probably at least somewhat important. Somewhat being the operative word, it's the government you never freaking know half the time. But, importantly, when I bring this up, the fact is, there's going to be transitioning. There's going to be efforts needed to make sure that things can actually go as you want them. So you will always need a first few to establish things. But as stated, with the hypocrisy, necessarily, these will not be moral individuals necessarily. Rather, the old guard must be amoral. Note here, A. They are not good or bad. They just do what is necessary. They're not immoral people. They're not just going to slaughter everyone because they feel like it, but they're not moral holier than thous. Rather, the purpose of the old guard is similar to any shock troop. Secure a foothold, beachhead, whatever you want to call it, push in, and use that to allow the intended large army that's supposed to get in to come in behind. In this case, the new moral system and establishment is what follows behind them. And so, as part of this establishment of the new system, a fortified position will be created. Think of this as the political machine that allows them to stay in power. Any old guard which fails to achieve such a thing will necessarily not have long to live and will not allow for a new guard to take its place. But once it's secured, the fortified position will allow for a new guard to emerge, which is moral and follows the principles of the ideology or belief system in question. Now, when I say this, it does not necessarily have to be violent. Can it be? Yes. But it does not need to be. because this is applying to all ideologies regardless of how you achieve it. For example, let's take the French Revolution. The Old Guard were the Jacobites, the Jacobins. Jacobite is English, specifically people revolting for the Stuarts, but that's a separate matter. Anyways, back to the point. I deeply apologize. The Jacobins were, in effect, the Old Guard for the French Revolution. They came in to make a point, to establish a new system built on liberty, equality, and brotherhood, or liberté, égalité, et fraternité. Probably butchered that, don't care much, it's French, but that was the point. They did a lot of, however, immoral and egalitarian actions, including a lot of purges, and actions taken to effectively establish the new French state and belief system. They were the Old Guard, the people who, maybe not immoral necessarily, plenty of them probably were, but that was not their main job, to be moral or immoral, but rather to establish a system. A necessary evil or just another immoral player, however you want to play it or argue it, it does not matter. They established the system. And from there, you would have people like Napoleon, who would actually build upon it. Now, he did restrain the revolution in a few areas, including bringing slavery back and making women the property of their husbands. Not the best, but he did expand a lot on the principles of the revolution, especially liberty and nationalism or fraternity. Indeed, one of the first Italian states, ever since the fall of Rome, was actually created by Napoleon. And so, he would be effectively the New Guard, the ones who would take upon the moral weight of the belief system. Similarly, the United States had it with its own people. Now, when our revolution happened, there were indeed some people who tried to argue for morality. But let's face it, with Washington and all the other people fighting the revolution, it wasn't the moralists that won. It was the pragmatists. Those who were not always moral, but did achieve things. George Washington is a prime example. Burning native villages and destroying Haudenosaunee and Iroquois territory is not a moral act. No, not at all. But it was effective at securing the borders with native tribes who were actively fighting against the United States. It was securing the new system by pushing out threats. Same could be said of John Adams, trying his best to assert U.S. sovereignty while still maintaining a distance. They were the Old Guard, the people whose job it was not to be moral, but to just establish something and make it work. You want to talk about the New Guard, that would be the generation after. That would be people like Jackson, later Lincoln, and of course, Theodore Roosevelt. Now, I bring them up as later examples because, well, let's face it, the New Guard is not always going to be able to fill up the moral task. That's just an unfortunate reality. But that is its role. It is to fill up that task once the Old Guard is gone. The Old Guard secures the point. They establish the control and make sure that things function. Essentially, they're the ones who build the system. The New Guard's job is to maintain it. But maintenance means nothing without the system in the first place. That is why an Old Guard is needed. You need someone to build the system that everyone else uses. And so, the Old Guard is needed necessarily to create that which is maintained by those who come after. I've probably ranted for long enough. I do apologize, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one.